Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us again for another Polish and Poise Sweet Chat. I'm Kimberly Pope of the Pope Institute. Joining me, we have Carolyn Burks of Carolyn Burks Photography and Duane Nash of Nash Media. So for chat number 2, we're going to talk about graphical design. If you missed the first chat, be sure to tune into that one, catch the replay, where we're talking about photography in particular. But now we're going to get more into the details of graphical design. We kind of started going in that direction from the last Sweet Chat. And so that set us up perfectly to have a discussion with you. So first, I want to kind of ask you, what should someone look for when they get ready to hire a graphical designer? What are the things that they should keep in mind, and how does that conversation go when they reach out?
Wow. Oddly enough, it's very similar to what Carrie said earlier in terms of having an understanding of what your needs are, having an understanding of what it is your designer's capabilities are, and then from there, talking with your designer to get an understanding of what it is that they can and cannot do. That's the best way to work with any creator, really.
Okay. So what are some typical things that you would say a business, someone who's looking to start a business, or they have a business, and maybe when they started, they can kind of put everything into place. What are some basic things that you think from a business perspective people should look for a graphical designer to help you with?
Wow. In terms of a graphic designer, for the most part, of course, everyone, the first thing that they always say that they need is a logo. Basically, some sort of extension of a visual extension of what their brand is. But first and foremost, you need to have a true understanding of what a brand is. A lot of times people think that your brand is your logo. No, a brand is what it is that you how you relay yourself to the public, to your clientele. Once you have an understanding of how you want to portray yourself as a company, then you start to have more of an understanding of what it is your true brand is. And from there, your graphics, your logo, your branding, your font usage, everything that's involved in that is an extension of said brand. So it's just making sure, once again, like I said before, having an understanding of what the jargon is and being able to convey exactly what it is that you're looking for.
Okay.
But for the most part, yeah, when you're dealing with a graphic designer, you want to start with having them help you out with your logo, your design, have an understanding of what fonts you want to use within your messaging, having an understanding of the colors and your color scheme that you want to use. And in some cases, even if it's that in depth, having an understanding of a secondary color scheme, secondary font usage, and then also having an understanding of what type of photography you would like to use within your branding as well. So all of that plays a part within your marketing.
I know when I started out, and I had my logo designed by a professional, it came back with, I think, 33 files, I want to say, because I had 3 different versions. There was the full color version, the white version, and the black version. And then it had a version with the URL, the website address in it, and a version without, because I knew, and that was what I asked for in particular, because I knew when it would come time for things like custom clothing, bags, things like that, if it's not built into the logo, you're paying for an additional line.
Right.
And so I said I need to have a version of my logo that already has the web address in there, so I can cut down on costs when it comes to getting table banners and things of that nature.
Right.
And so there's a version with the logo, without the logo. There's versions for print versus web. So that's where you get into the CMYK and the RGB and the EPS versions.
Yeah, with colors, you see CMYK, RGB, the hex code when you're dealing with web, file sizes and file types in terms of EPS, JPEGs, PNGs, AIs, PSDs, InDesign. So all of that is having, like I said, an understanding of what it is that you need, and the type of vendors, the various types of vendors, and exactly what it is that you're going to use that image for. When you're dealing with social media, of course, a lot of times you're going to deal with JPEGs, GIFs.
We're saying GIF, even though the creator likes GIF.
Got you.
But we are team GIF here.
Got you. So yes, JPEGs, GIFs, PNGs for social media. When you're dealing with print, you most definitely want to deal with, like I said before, if it's not a photo, you want it to be a vector-based image. But of course, if them with photos. Of course, you can do JPEGs, you can do Photoshop files as well. Do people print raw images?
I don't know anyone that prints a raw image.
Okay, I just wanted to check and see to make sure because I don't want to
I
say
don't know if
anything
you
wrong.
can you print a raw image?
You know what? I don't even know. I haven't
I've
even tried.
never tried.
Yeah.
I
So that, and then of course the file that you talked about earlier in terms of the compressed files that iPhones now use.
Yes.
So that HC.
HEC or HEIC.
HEIC, that's what it is. Yeah. So making sure that you also are dealing with a designer who understands what an HEIC is and knows, especially if you're like me. Even though I can work on a Mac, I primarily work on a PC. So whenever someone sends me, of course, an HEIC file, the fun of having to convert that, even though there are easy ways of doing that, but making sure that your designer has an understanding of file conversion and the like.
And would you say that most graphical designers, if they're styling a logo, putting together a logo for someone, is it standard now to also give them a visual identity guide to go along with it, or is that something that still kind of is on an individual basis?
It's an individual basis. It would be best if they could. I would suggest that you deal with a designer that does that. But my thing is this, right? I always tell people, and I don't want to sit here and I don't want to begrudge anyone that uses, someone who is not necessarily a graphic designer fully by trade. If you get someone that does graphic design on the side, or if you deal with websites that give you graphic design at a lower rate. If that's what you want to do, fine, so be it. It is what it is, right? But I also suggest that your knowledge of who you are as a company, knowledge of who you are as a brand, and what it is that you want to do, kind of has to work along with the knowledge of the designer that you're dealing with, right? So if you have a lot of understanding of what it is that you want to do, then you're capable of dealing with an inexpensive designer. But if you don't have any idea of what it is that you want to do, I would suggest that you work with a designer that knows exactly what it is that they're doing. And that's where that investment comes in on your part, so that you don't have to necessarily do that work. And I understand that it can be a lot of work, especially for a small company, to try to figure out everything in terms of marketing and having that understanding. But there are people that do. That's why when you come to me with vision boards, I'm like, okay, cool. She's doing work. That's fine. That's great. It makes things a lot easier on me. But for those that, you just go ahead and just allow someone to do what it is that you want to do, you just shrug your shoulders and say, okay, cool, that's fine. I like that. I'll take that. It is what it is. It's fine. I'm not going to begrudge them. Sometimes they do good work. But I would suggest that when you're getting files from them, that you request these things. Even if you don't get a style guide, always get a four color version of your logo, a RGB version of your logo, or at least having an understanding of what your colors are and that color code of RGB and hex, which is used for web. Also have a black version of all black version of your logo, and all white version of your logo with transparent backgrounds, so that you can place it on whatever type of document that you need. And that would be a great start to do that. Anything else other than that? Of course, it would be nice to evolve into that, having an understanding of things like responsive logos, like I was sharing with Carrie earlier this week, having an understanding of what a one-color version of your logo is. All of that's great to know, but I always say from the beginning, have at least a four-color, a black, and a white version of your logo, and then you will move on from there.
I know when I started out and I worked with a professional designer. This is why I started working with you. I'm sorry.
That's fine. It happens. I mean, it is what it is. I'm not taken aback when people come, or when they come to me after working with another designer. The best way that I handle that is making sure that I make things a lot easier for the client as possible from there.
Yeah. But so what I had started out with one company, and they gave me a visual identity guide, and in it they had everything except for what my font was. So they had all the colors, they had the hex code, they had all of that. My primary, my secondary colors, the sizing of what I should do and shouldn't do. Like, you want to make sure that you don't make your logo, especially if it's kind of complicated like my logo is. There's only, so small you really want to make your logo because then it's not legible.
Right.
And they had almost everything. But then fast forward several years later, and you and I are working on something. I was like, I don't know. I knew what the font was for the main part of it, but it's a different font that they use for the rest of the letters in my logo.
Yeah.
So the Pope is Plaza font.
Yes.
But the rest of it is a different font. And we've had to sort of figure out, what is the new font? And that's what you can get when you're working with a professional, because that company is no longer in business. So I couldn't just go to them and say, hey, could you tell me what font you use for that? They're gone. And that can happen sometimes when you're working with small businesses and things like that. And so, but they gave me everything but that. They gave me 33 files, a full guide, and all this great stuff, except for what that secondary font was. And so, again, that's where it comes to when you continue to work with professionals, they can help you when it comes to when you're in clutch, because when you're trying to have a consistent look across everything, then it's okay, I need to know what are all my fonts. And, Canva can only help you with so much.
Yes. And even to your point of having your logo in various sizes, right? That's exactly what a responsive logo is, right? So, and that's why it's always important to deal with a designer that has that understanding. A lot of times, we as designers, we study these things. Had a professor at North Carolina A&T State University.
And pride.
The great Leander Kennedy, God bless him, bless him for everything that he's blessed me with in terms of my knowledge. He would always tell us a great logo. Well, first and foremost, he'd always say, well, yes. But he would always tell us that simplicity is the key to great design. That's number one. Number two, as it pertains to logo design, a great logo, you can place a great logo on your thumb and still be capable of recognizing what that logo is. So that is a great example of what a responsive logo is.
Okay.
So from there, you'll have a nice logo. Well, you'll have your logo. And then with responsive logos, that's taking into consideration the various different sizes in which your logo will go to from big to small. One great example would be, of course, the Walt Disney logo, right? So you take the Walt Disney logo, you have the script of the name, you have the castle. That's the entire logo. You go a little bit smaller, then you move the castle, it's just the script.
Yeah.
You go a little bit smaller than that, it's just the D.
Yeah.
So that's a huge example of a responsive logo. And they look, with Target, you have the full name of the bullseye, you get as small as possible, it's just the bullseye.
Yeah.
I understand a lot of times people don't take that into consideration when they're designing that logos. It's great if you do have a designer that does that, but people don't. But just make sure that your logo is always capable of being read at a small size, because sometimes you won't have the ability to dictate how large your logo is going to be on certain pieces.
So you preaching right there. See, I love when y'all two start getting into your element and they start preaching. I just want to put money right there on the altar.
You can cash at me if you like.
I mean, the doors are open. Just saying,
Okay. And it's funny. So I want to kind of ask you another similar question that I asked Carolyn earlier with respect to rights. So we talked earlier when it comes to photography, that's an area where people kind of get confused and just automatically assume, well, they hire a photographer so they own the pictures. And like, no, you don't own the rights to the picture. The photographer owns those pictures. It's theirs. You pay for the service. How does it work when it comes to graphical design?
Well, with graphic design, it's a little bit different. I mean, for the most part, well, for me, for me, it's a little bit different because once you pay for the service, you pay for the service. Whatever I've done for you is yours. From that point, though, in terms of getting things trademarked, of course, you have to go through that entire process too, and just having an understanding, or at least getting with someone that has an understanding of how to trademark an image is always best to do.
Because that's what I did. I went to you and I said, hey, D, I'm about to put in for my trademarks. So because I put in for 3 trademarks, and one of them was actually something you did for me, and I said, D, let's talk about this. Do you, how do you want me to handle this? Do you still own the full rights? Am I okay with trademarking this? And we had that conversation, and that's something that even if you didn't have it in the beginning, or even if you did have it in the beginning, if you get ready to trademark something, revisit if you can and say, hey, we still good here. If you don't have it in writing already,
Yes.
It's go back and make sure that you own the rights to everything. Because I've done things where I've copyrighted, because sometimes people go by the implicit copyright, whereas I want to see my papers, so I did the whole application. Because I like to have receipts. So in that application, it asks you, does anyone else have can they claim rights to any of this material?
Right.
Same thing happened with the trademarking when I went through a professional attorney. Again, you see the trend here. You see the trend. I only deal with professionals. So, you can do it yourself. But I went with them, and they even had questions on their application before they would even file the application for me on my behalf, which is, can anyone claim rights to any of this stuff, whether it's claiming rights to the marks, claiming rights to the pictures that I'm going to use as evidence for the marks, all that kind of stuff. So I'm glad you were very specific and you said, well, for me.
Yeah, because for the most part, when I'm designing things, and it also depends upon who I'm working with, because there can be instances, like Carrie said earlier, it's an agreement that you have with your client, right? On the usage of it, and whether or not you want to go ahead and release complete and total rights to them, or if it's going to be a situation where you're going to have to negotiate some sort of deal on how you're going to be compensated for that design. Case in point, I'm not going to name the name of the company, and I won't name the name of the designer, but this company, it's an apparel company, well known within the HBCU world right now. They have a particular image that they use. Oddly enough, the designer also sells apparel with that same logo on it.
Oh, wow.
When I first saw that, I thought that was very interesting, but my first thought was, oh wow, there has to be a deal.
A licensing deal, right?
Well, they must not have come to a complete agreement with that in terms of how they're working that through, so that he wouldn't be able to do that. So whatever it is that they're doing, they're both capable of selling the exact same product.
Wow.
Exactly, right? But he was the designer, so yes, he's still selling his stuff. But they're the company in which he did the logo for, so they're the ones known for it too, and they're selling it too. Yeah, it's very interesting and very messy. So I don't know whether or not I don't know the ins and outs of how that situation works. But all I can do is speak from someone that's looking at it from the outside looking in, that has it's that exact same thing. Just making sure that you have a complete and utter understanding with your designer about what the rights and usages are of that design is going to be. But for the most part, with graphic designers that's doing a logo that's not being resold often, if it's just a logo for a company, a lot of times they will go ahead and relinquish those rights to you. But that is a conversation that needs to be had with that designer.
So let's talk about Canva. You need a drink, honey? You need a drink?
Well,
I don't have anything stronger than
well, this is water. No, I'll be fine, right?
Canva. Now let me put this out there. I love Canva. I love it. I use it all the time. I got the pro version. However, when it comes to certain things, I have to use a professional because I feel like when it counts, like when it really, really, really counts. I use Canva for my regular social media posts.
Right.
That's about it.
Yeah.
But when it comes to everything else, I call up D, say, okay, D, I need some more work done. And so, as great as Canva is, and it's got people thinking out there on the street that they are the best things since sliced bread, that it makes them think they are professional graphical designers says.
Yes.
And, I just kind of I want to hear from a professional. Uh, you know, when does it make sense? And kind of what maybe, and not just Canva, because there's other apps out there, but I use Canva because it's the more popular one nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just say from apps like a Canva,
Mm-hmm.
what is it that it can and cannot do? Because I remember a certain thing called rights that we just finished talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be careful, I believe, in some of these apps that, let's say, you use them to design your logo. Do you really own that logo, or is it there's some specific language? I know this topic has come up with that particular app before. There's some things you have to kind of read the fine print.
Oh wow. Okay.
But there may be other apps where I think, and I forget the language for Canva specifically, but it is something that needs to be reviewed. But I'm sure for all the other apps as well that are out there, you still need to think about that when you are using something else to design, it's almost like you're going to a professional in a way where you're not the one that's really creating it by yourself. You are using the aid of something.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us kind of your thoughts on when it makes sense, because if you can, you can use the logo as an example where I mentioned I got 33 files when I hired a professional. How many people are going to sit there and design their logo in Canva and do it 33 times?
They may not even have the wherewithal to even think about doing that. My thing is this: Canva's fine. That means it frees my time up to do other things. Make grilled cheese sandwiches, sing the songs that I like to sing. That's what that does. Exactly, right?
Yeah.
I look at Canva being the difference between going to see a doctor and self-medicating, right? No, truthfully, think about it, because basically you're taking care of the service by yourself. You may know what it takes in order to fix whatever's ailing you or whatever it is that you need to do. You might be able to deal with it. You might not necessarily deal with it properly. You can do it by yourself. It would be great if you could get some assistance from someone else. But if you can go ahead and take care of yourself, go ahead and take that there. Deal with it. I don't have a beef with it. If that's what you can afford, is what you can afford. It's great if you make that investment, if you can. But if that's what you can do, and you can actually do it to what it is, to your capabilities of what it is that you feel so that you need, that's wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah, but I've only dealt with Canva briefly. It's just confusing to me because I'm just used to a certain interface when it pertains to various programs that I've used. That's the only issue that I've had with it. But other than that, it's a good tool.
Yeah.
It is.
So, but
it's a great multiplier.
Your recommendation, though, is if you can.
Yeah.
Are there certain things that, like I was saying, when it counts for those types of projects, I have to go to a professional. I'm not going to use Canva for. Can you think of some type of when it counts moments?
Yeah, like I said before, just when you need that more in-depth approach to your logos, to your marketing, just having that understanding of the various ways in which you're going to need your design, the various platforms in which it's going to be used for, the various types of vendors that you're going to be working with in order to have it printed. That's when you want to go ahead and deal with someone that's a little bit more experienced, or once again, you can go ahead and get the knowledge yourself, learn to do it in Canva, and deal with it yourself. I'm not opposed to people doing that either, but I would suggest that you allow someone to go ahead and that's more. That I would suggest that you lean on someone that's a little bit more knowledgeable to handle that for you, so you can go ahead and focus your attention elsewhere.
Because I would think, and this is just me, and we'll continue to use the logo as an example. That's the thing that's going to represent you all over the place.
Yeah.
Not many people change their logo. Like, you may go through a rebrand or something. You might tweak it here and there with years in between times that you do that. But for the most part, that's the thing that really counts and is going to be, has shelf life. Whereas a social media post, 24 hours later, it's okay. It's something else.
Canva's logo templates, so you don't want your logo looking like someone else's exact same logo with different text.
Yeah.
Because they're basically starting with templates that you alter.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's I didn't think about it from that perspective, but yeah.
Yeah.
That part too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the photography conversation, where you can use the iPhone if you know how to really use it. And so with Canva, if you're starting out with templates, you really got to do all kinds of changes to
not
make
make
sure.
it look like something that
Right.
someone else has already altered from that site.
Yeah, because I've seen plenty of things on social media, and I'm like, I know what you use to make that. Because I got a similar one myself on my post.
Right.
You know, so it's one of those things where how much time do you want to spend you yourself sitting there at your computer, or even if you're doing it on your phone, really doing the tweaks, design, and or when you can just get it professionally done and have that uniqueness, have it really speak to you, because that's one of the things where when the company that designed my logo, we had a conversation. We haven't picked up on the trend yet. We're talking about conversations you have with professionals. We had a conversation as to what I was looking for my logo to kind of say. And that goes back to how you started off, where you were saying, talking about brand. You know, brand is not a logo, but it's again, how is it, how you kind of want to present yourself and what it says and how it carries. And so that reputation. And so we talked about that, and they came up with 3 options, and each option had like an A and B version.
Mm-hmm.
And what I did was I picked one option, A, for one place, and took B option from another, like the second or third choice they gave me, and put them together, and I said, that's what I want my logo to look like. Because I think that captures what I want people to feel and kind of think about when I say the Pope Institute for Polish, Poise, and Etiquette. That's what I wanted to evoke. And so for me, I think that's important. You can't really get that when you're working in Canva, right? You've got to really have a conversation with a professional who really knows, and kind of like what you were saying as well with photography. Right, you can have that white background, but how do you really show up in that picture? Do you actually say something, evoke emotion? Do you look alive? Those types of things. So to me, that's kind of like what I add to it as far as food for thought between being self-medicated and going to a doctor.
Exactly. Yeah, that doctor will break down exactly what it is your issue is and the various ways that you're capable of dealing with it. But if you're trying to self-medicate, you're only going to be as limited to the amount of information that you're exposed to.
Right. Okay. So I got a last couple of questions here, and we're going to wrap up this conversation. I'm going to swing it over to you, Carolyn. How have you accommodated graphical design when you've taken shots? So I know there's a particular shot of me that you took, which was your idea to take, and you were telling me to point this way and do this.
Right.
And
Because
so
I know that your shots would be used for branding. So some of them are rule of thirds. You're in the far left of the screen. Some of them I'll have you point and have enough white space or negative space so that when he gets it, he can fill in with text without having to cut you and move you too far over. So those are some of the main things. Like I knew certain things would be used for social media marketing, and you would be adding text and graphics to it. So some of them I gave you a lot of space over top of your head and asked you to point up. Some of them I gave you a lot of space to the left and asked you to point. And some of them, even headshots, I know that some people will take their headshots. I like clean white backgrounds on a lot of things. That's what I like. So if I do your headshot, even if your headshot is centered, which generally a headshot is, I know that I can shoot it if you're going to use it for certain marketing things. I can shoot it with enough white space on the left and right of you that when you crop it, you're not going to crop any limbs. Or if you need it, that white is an even white, and you can be moved over, and that same color can be matched to whatever text you're going to put with it.
like we talked about earlier, where during the photography discussion, some of the shots you've done for me, I've given it to T, say move me over in the picture, and he was able to do that flawlessly. So
I don't think you understand how much of a godsend that is. That's why I shook my head and spoke under my breath when you were saying that, because it makes things so much easier for me as a designer when photos are getting Like a lot of times I've been given photos where things have been cropped out, cut off, and I would have to end up doing photo enhancement to that in order for it to properly work. But if the photo is properly done, all I have to do is just crop it or adjust it to make whatever needs to fit there fit. It makes my day that much easier.
So we knew that we were doing branding for you.
Mm-hmm.
So that branding, I knew that you were gonna put text on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to make sure that the lighting was even on the background for the white shots for him to add or do whatever manipulation he needed to do, because you more than likely were gonna keep that white background, or if you didn't keep the white background, the white was even enough that he could just take you off the white background and transpose you somewhere else without, it being a messy lift.
But you've done that for me before as well.
Mm-hmm.
When you did my media kit, you lifted me off, I think I maybe a couple of pictures and did some things. And so one of the things that I thought about as you were talking, wide shots, and I brought this up last week. I did an IG live where, make sure you catch the replay. I was talking about website design, and I had 5 things that were recommendations of do's and don'ts. And one of the things that I mentioned somewhere in that conversation, I talked about taking enough wide shots, landscape, for those of you who know what I'm talking about. Because when you have enough wide shots, you can do things with them like you were just talking about, where a lot of people, I think sometimes they always think of taking a portrait, kind of just, and you can't really do much with that when you are talking about websites or maybe certain types of collateral that you're going to have, that you're going to either do yourself or have a graphical designer do for you. So if you can kind of talk about, either one of you, the importance of making sure. And also I saw a post, and it was funny because I chuckled when I read the post. Someone had put on Instagram that when they started out, they worked in, they had some type of arts background or what have you. They hired a photographer to do some shots, and they thought they had planned it out perfectly until they got the shots back and realized, I don't have enough shots I can use because there's not enough wide shots. And so if either one of you can kind of talk to that, or both of you.
Well, briefly, a lot of times I've gotten imagery just like that, and God, we're told in life sometimes just make it enough. And I'm good enough to do that, but there are a lot of people who aren't.
Right.
So if you can go ahead and have that aid there, or if you can have that photographer that's mindful of taking wide shots, then anyone, well, I'm not gonna say anyone, but a talented artist can go ahead and deal with that within the layout scheme that they're working within. But it also makes it that much easier for a good designer as well.
Right.
So I don't have to make it enough.
Because you could always crop it to
Yeah.
make it, but you can't widen.
No.
But then it goes back to what we talked about earlier. You can have more pixelation and all that kind of stuff where it just looks grainy or like whatever kind of.
Resolution.
Yeah.
Well, not just that, a lot of times I have to do photo manipulation by extending. Case in point, I'm already thinking of a particular client right off the top of my head where shots have been given to me like that, and they wanted the shot to be wider. So I had to extend the forest that's behind them. Yeah, so
That's magic.
Exactly right. So yeah, and we've gotten to the point where it looks natural enough that they're capable of using it as a wide shot. But of course, when it was first given to me, I said to myself, okay, so if that's what they want done, I can make it happen, but it would be a lot easier if the photographer would have taken a wide shot. But dice game, they probably took the photo with iPhone. Again, not taking away from iPhones, because if you get someone that understands elements of design, they'll know to take wide shots too.
Right.
But they just didn't, and I didn't, so I had to.
Right.
So from that, this will be the last thing I ask. You've touched on a few things throughout the conversation. What are the key things that you would say make either good design and bad design?
The key, go back right to the end of the candidate, simplicity.
Yes.
Yes, class.
Yes.
Just go back to simplicity. Keep it as simple as possible. Try to make it as uncomplicated as possible. when you're dealing with design, because you don't want to complicate your message. Whatever it is that you're trying to relay, you don't want to make it complicated. Just make it as simple as possible.
Well, thank you both. And thank you all for tuning in for our second Sweet Chat. We are going to have a couple of more conversations where we talk about branding, maybe one or two. We'll see how the conversation goes. And we're going to bring it all together and just talk about, have more of a general conversation on branding and kind of things that we've seen, lessons learned, kind of some advice. So this is where we're getting more into, definitely for businesses, small businesses, entrepreneurs, influencers, things like that. You touch on some things that from an individual, a personal perspective, your personal brand. I think there's some things here you can, lots of nuggets we get in today from our first two conversations. But I think now we're about to go more into the conversation for businesses. And so we hope you tune in for that as well. Take care, everyone.